Hello, I'm Dr. Paul Rose, and in this short video I'd like to explain some of the links between feeding and foraging behaviours and anti-predatory behaviours, how animals balance the need to collect food and energy against energy expenditure on vigilance behaviour. I'm going to mainly use the European starling as my example, but a few other species will be used as well. So here is the European starling, Sturnus vulgaris, a common garden bird in the United Kingdom. This animal is feeding on a high energy resource, some fat balls that have been put out on a bird feeder. This is an important food source for this bird, which is versatile and very generalist in its foraging strategies. Because the starling is so generalist, it has become very successful. It can exploit a range of different habitats and exist in many different environments around the world. Consequently, it has been able to colonize non-native areas, particularly thanks to the behaviors of human beings, and you can now find starlings in many countries that they would not normally be found in. Because starlings are omnivorous, they utilize a wide range of feeding and foraging behaviors, both on and off the ground. This means they can consume a wide range of different food resources, hence their generalist nature. This is in exact contrast to highly specialized animals such as the giant panda, which is an extreme habitat specialist, only feeding on bamboo, and consequently has a restricted range and habitat choice. Let's talk a little more about foraging behavior. A food patch is the area where an animal is feeding, and within that food patch, animals try to feed optimally, i.e. they like to gain as much energy as possible from the feeding patch whilst expending as little energy as they can on searching and processing behaviours for that particular resource that they are accessing. For animals to forage optimally, they must assess the quality of the food resource and the quality of the foraging patch that the food is contained within. Therefore, animals can use information from others to determine when to move on from foraging, where is everyone else feeding that might be good value, and what is the most cost-effective foraging behaviour within that feeding patch. Because starlings commonly forage in groups, much research has been conducted on how they use local information to work out the most effective feeding and foraging strategy for that habitat. Starlings are able to use information from conspecifics, i.e. birds around them, to work out where food resources are most plentiful. Remember, food resources are highly valuable, but they are often found in very limited areas and in limited numbers. And lots of food resources cause effort on the part of the animal trying to access the food resource, such as in these foraging butterflies that are having to flap their wings whilst they hold on to this flower to insert their proboscis to gain the nectar. That is a very costly behaviour which is balanced against the energy that they can get from the food itself. One of the things that can interfere with optimal foraging is the performance of other behaviours that the animal has to do around foraging. For example, care for youngsters. As you can see in this video of an adult starling with the black spotty plumage having to deal with 3 very hungry youngsters that also want their dinner. Therefore, not only is the animal having to work hard to ensure it can provide for its own energetic needs, it's also having to work hard to meet the energy demands of its youngsters too, who are less effective and less efficient at foraging until they can learn how to forage more appropriately. Youngsters also bring with them other challenges. They are more likely to be attacked by predators, and consequently adult birds will increase their vigilance rate to ensure that the flock is remaining wary of any potential danger. So there is a higher cost on the adult birds whilst they are trying to forage when youngsters are around, both energetically as well as from a vigilance point of view to look out for danger. Here is a group of starlings foraging on a lawn. What you might be able to see is the vigilance behaviour that occurs whilst the animals are feeding. The birds put their heads up and scan the immediate environment. The adult birds, those with the black plumage, do this more than the youngsters, those with the brown plumage. Whilst I was filming this, I was lucky enough to see the escape behaviours of the birds. They all fly off when they sense a predator. And here is my predator. I hope you can hear its calls. It's a carrion crow. This crow is particularly dangerous to young birds. All the starlings have moved, within this flock, to a new, safer feeding area under some larger trees. The birds continue doing the scanning and the vigilance behaviours around their foraging activities. And again, it is the adult birds that perform this more than the youngsters. Let's look at some of the vigilance costs associated with foraging. This paper by Fernandez-Jurisic et al. Suggests that starlings have time competition between foraging and scanning. This means that birds are constantly having to determine which is the best and most optimum behaviour to perform in that environment. Do I look for food or do I scan for danger? Interestingly, when social information, i.e. what birds can glean from each other's presence, is reduced, and this may be because of visual barriers between conspecifics, the starlings have to spend more time scanning. They have to do this to find out what everyone else is up to. In more open environments, birds don't need to do this as much because it's clear to everybody that they can see what's going on. The neighbourhood distance and the visual obstruction rates negatively affect food searching. Consequently, where your neighbour is and how much of a barrier there is between birds is going to reduce the amount of food you intake because you're going to have to look more closely to see where everyone is and what everyone is doing. This vigilance scanning is strongly connected to the presence of other flock members. And as I said previously, the presence of youngsters in a group also adds a vigilance burden. In the case of other species, it's not necessarily just predators that impact on foraging and vigilance time. In the case of research on giraffes, the type of animal within the group, male or female, young or old, has more of an impact on the scanning and vigilance levels than the potential presence of predators, even though a baseline scanning for predators is still maintained. When giraffes are foraging together, I appreciate these are in captivity, the composition of the group is more important than the likelihood of predators being nearby. Energetic costs are imposed on giraffe when they have a high head-up vigilance position, which affects the amount of time they will spend performing that behaviour. And here's what I mean by that high head-up position. This is a female giraffe with her calf, and she is spending more time performing vigilance than she would normally. So I hope you can see from this presentation that optimal foraging is key to how animals gain sufficient energy. But they can only forage optimally if they consider the performance of other important behaviours. The social composition of their groups, the presence of youngsters, will affect vigilance rates. These vigilance rates are often, but not always, associated with the presence of predators. Much work has been performed on the group effects of foraging. You can find very many interesting references on how animals forage optimally in groups and how they balance the need for energy requirements against the looking out for and scanning events for predators. Animals that forage in groups are constantly considering where and how they should feed, as well as the best strategies to employ to avoid predation.